Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Poddin My Noggin. I'm your host, CK Sims, and today we are joined by Sarah, and your last name just completely went from my brain.
That's okay. Doucette. It's a hard one to pronounce too, so you're good.
Sarah Doucette. Oh my gosh. So Sarah Doucette is here to talk to us today about her story, and I'm really interested in digging in. And for me, people who have watched this podcast before, I am a huge feminist, and I think anybody who abuses a woman is like the lowest scum of the earth. And I have like zero kindness in my heart for them.
Yeah.
And I try to still be kind, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
So I really, it's hard for me to hear these stories, but it's also really important to have these conversations so that people know that there's hope on the other side.
Yeah.
So Sarah, thank you very much for being a guest on Poddin My Noggin and for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us. Why don't we go back to the beginning and pick up there?
So the very beginning, just a little bit of background on myself and my upbringing. I was raised in a family that became born again Christians right when I was born. And so there was no secular world allowed in our household for the most part. Okay. So I left in small town Maine, went to Florida for college because I was like ready to kind of spread my wings and discover the world because I had lived such a sheltered life up until that point. And I was wholly unprepared for the people that would come into my life. Even though I went down to Florida to go to a Christian college, so, you know, in my parents' mind, you know, that's fine, right? Didn't prepare them for me to meet, you know, another, and I'm using air quotes here, Christian man from a local church who did not go to my college. And I just had never really met anybody like him before. I wasn't allowed to date until like my senior year in high school. And I went to a small Christian school. So by that point, all of my friends had dated everybody. And it just felt weird and ick to me. So I literally left and went to college with no experience in dating whatsoever. So
what denomination were you?
So my parents, they started out as Baptist. Okay. And then they moved on to a Pentecostal church. Assemblies of God, I think, was like the specific denomination. And then I ended up going to an Assemblies of God college down in Florida.
My parents are both Pentecostal preachers, so we
really?
have identical upbringings in the sense that when I left home, that statement you made about just not being prepared at all was in fact me at 18. I'm not going off to college, but going out into the world and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this whole, what is it? They say, you know, be in the world, but not of the world. Well, yes. You still got to be in the world, right? Like you still have to know something. You still have to have exposure. And I didn't have that. So I didn't have the tools. I talked to a lot of parents who will listen to me, you know, when they're talking about whether or not like kids should date, you know, and at what age they should start dating. I can't tell you what age they should start dating, but what I can tell you is that why not let them date when they're in your home and you can supervise? You can see the red flags. You can say, oh, your boyfriend is mad at you because you're friends with another boy on social media. Like that's unokay controlling behavior and you don't have to put up with that. So I'm a big proponent of like you know, letting our kids experience the world when we're there to have conversations with them and to guide them through some of this stuff. Yeah, so that's a little side soapbox that I just got on, but
I enjoy the soapbox. I feel that I'm right there with you.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Christians often isolate and shelter their children so much in this sort of twisted hope and desire that they're going to grow up to be um, perfect, young men and women, but they don't realize actually the level of damage that they're causing to these people because they're
Hmm.
not being prepared,
Right.
right? So the second they're outside of their echo chamber
Yeah,
of Christianity, it's a whole different world out there.
it really is. And also I find that, they're taught to only like their own kind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then, they can be very unwelcoming and very unkind, even to other Christians, right? Like, so we went to a Pentecostal Assemblies of God church, but I went to a Baptist church school, and
Mm-hmm.
I was an outcast in that school. I tried to, make friends and be friends. And I was never one of like the teacher's favorites. Like, I always felt on the outside because even though, my parents were paying for us to go there, we were still on the outside.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just, they do lose a lot, I think. And if you're being true to, what the faith is, right? Like you're supposed to love everyone. Like I don't remember a
Everyone.
but statement after that when I read the Bible
Well,
personally.
there's no but statements. But it seems that is one of the there's quite a few key messages that are missed,
Yeah.
right? But
Hmm.
that is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
To love thy neighbor, to be kind and compassionate, to live as Jesus. So to live as Jesus is to love everyone.
Yeah. To
And
talk to the outcasts of society, to like be inclusive.
absolutely. And then like there's countless iterations in the Bible where Christ did this.
Hmm.
So like he fed the poor,
Right.
he like so like yeah, I feel like this could be
A whole
uh,
other
a glass of wine and a weekend throwback of like this is
unpacking
what yes the religion.
religious trauma.
So you met this man in college. He was a church goer, air
Yes.
quotes,
Yes.
from a not from your school but from a different church, and
Hmm.
I'm assuming he was.
So he was friends with some of the local people who went to the college that I went to, and he was the life of the party. He was so fun. Um, Steve-O, right? Like he was just um in the book I call him gregarious. Like he was just a big personality. He's the guy that would go to the bar and buy a round of shots, right, for everybody. And everyone knew his name by the time they left. So for me, coming from such a sheltered background, like he latched on to me and I was along for the ride. I was like, oh, like, I'm making friends. I'm having a social life. I'm getting to experience all these really cool things and I didn't have to do anything for it. I'm just like I'm Steven's girlfriend. So I'm, kind of in by association kind of thing. When we were dating, there were definitely some red flags that I didn't recognize, hindsight being what it is. I look at it now and I'm like, oh, I remember one incident where we had gone out for the day and we were trying to decide where to go to eat for lunch. And I think like everyone has this whole like, where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Right. It's like that typical thing. Well, with Steven, it would escalate, right? Little arguments like that would get blown way out of proportion. And so the first time I really remember this happening, we'd had a lovely day. We were trying to figure out where to go to eat. And I literally suggested every restaurant within like a 20-mile radius, and he turned all of them down. So then I said, well, I mean, I'm okay if we just skip lunch. You can just bring me back to my dorm and, you know, we can just call it a day. And you could just feel the atmosphere in the car change. He just got really, really quiet. And I, kind of sat there in the uncomfortable quiet for a little while. And finally I asked him, I was like, are you mad? Like, are you really mad about this? And he just kind of looked over at me and he said, "You wouldn't want to see me when I'm angry." I was like, okay. So in my I think I was like 19 at the time, brain, I was just like, oh, he's just staying quiet to like protect me from his anger. He doesn't want to like lash out at me. So, he's exhibiting self-control. Oh, that's so nice. And I just kind of played it off, right? Because I had no
As you
idea.
would, I think that this is normal, right?
Yeah.
You're young, new surroundings, secluded, sheltered life.
Mm-hmm.
You have this guy, right? Like, I think the way you computed that just feels so natural and normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm very non-confrontational by nature anyways, right? Like I get along with everyone, I'm friends with everyone, right? So for me, I was just like, okay, that makes sense. So there were just a couple incidences like that, in our dating relationship. And everything was just very manipulative. The first time he told me that he loved me was a manipulation. I didn't see it at the time, but, he had been being very inappropriate and like flirtatious with a girlfriend of mine. And I got upset with him and I called him out on it. And, that's when he was like, yeah, but I don't love her. I love you. And like that was the first time that I'd ever had a guy tell me that they were in love with me. And I was just like stopped in my tracks. And I was like, oh, you love me? It was just, so everything was with him was a manipulation if you really peel it back and look at it. Yeah.
And
Hindsight.
the other part that you were talking about is like buying shots for everybody at the bar. And to me, like, that was an automatic red flag because it's posturing.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Uh,
I haven't used that term for it before, but you're absolutely right. Like he loved an audience as well. So like, oh my God, I used to hate this. Okay. So we would go to a restaurant and he would go and put his name in at the hostess stand. And then he'd come back and he'd sit down with our group. And then when our table was ready, the host or hostess would come out and say, Superman, party of, whatever number. And we would all just be like mortified. And he'd stand up really tall. He was like 6'3", really tall, everyone laughing. And, for the rest of us, we were just like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. But, he loved that. If he was having a conversation with you one-on-one, but you were out in public, like you and I would speak at a volume at which, I could hear you. And like, if we weren't keeping secrets, maybe like a couple people next to us could overhear if they wanted to. He would be talking at full volume, trying to get the attention of everyone in there because he wanted them to hear what he was saying, because in his mind, he was just genius. He always needed an audience. He obtained and draw this obnoxious. Yeah. But on, that for itself,
sounds
it's not
lovely.
necessarily a red flag, but like add that with all of the other things and you're just like, okay, yeah, something's not right here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
He's a 10,
that's
but
more
he
cringy than it
talks
is
too loud kind of thing.
red flaggy, if you will. But um yes. Yes. Yeah,
For a
okay.
year, and we
So
got engaged on our 1 year
how long are you
anniversary of
dating him?
dating. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't bad. Outside,
Romantically?
and like under the stars, and I can't remember how we led up to it, but he was like, yeah, the first time we were here, we like walked. So the first time we were at this place, by the way, we were not dating. We had just met and we'd gone out to dinner with a group of people, and I was dating somebody at the time. And he and I were still like hanging out, and then he basically convinced me that I needed to break up with my boyfriend that I was seeing at the time. And then, and I talk about this in the book, and when I was writing the book, I had a writing coach helping me out. And when I wrote this, gave me the biggest like chills and creeps ever, because he basically just stood over my shoulder and like, coached me through like breaking up with this guy. Yeah, so it's kind of a creepy story when you read it in the book. But I broke up with my boyfriend, and then shortly after, he and I started dating. And so we went back to that same location. It was a really nice spot. And then, he's like, well, this wasn't here the first time we were here. And he pulled out like a ring and proposed. So it was cutish for like, yeah, I mean, for like he was 2 years older than me.
It
So
is cutest for sure. How old was
no.
he?
So I
So
was
not
20
there's not a
when we got
drastic
married.
age
I turned 21. We got married in January. I turned 21 in June of that year. And so he was 22 when we got married. Nope, we were engaged for 6 months. So not too long.
Or a year engagement.
But some things were happening where I was in college at the time. And so we wanted to do the wedding over Christmas break. And I told him that, when I got married, going back to my home state, which was Maine, to do it. And so he had secured a job transfer. And so he was supposed to transfer. Literally, we got married, and then like by the end of that month, we were pulled out of college, and we did it pretty quickly because of all of that stuff.
Okay. So that's a big move for him.
So he kind of like felt himself like a northern New England person.
Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't too bad for him, and he liked the colder weather. So it was fine.
Okay,
so we moved back up here. Like, I love. Okay, I'm a little salty. So shit hit the fan like pretty much immediately. Like the honeymoon was the worst. Like his shit attitude came out like right in the airport. Started trying to earn upgrades because he was on his honeymoon, and then when like the airline attendant would upgrade us for free to first class, he started being belligerent in the airport. And, at that point I was just like, it's okay. I don't need first class. I'm like trying to calm him down. And, and I kind of went up to pull him back and just be like, it's okay, babe. I'm okay. I don't need first class. It's fine. And the next thing I know, he's like pulled me aside and holding me very tightly and telling me, don't you ever correct me in front of people again. I was just like, oh, okay. And it just kind of went downhill. One of the statistics that I like to point out, especially like this, or may have been, right? Like there's still a lot of shame and stigma that we feel coming out of it, especially because in my case, I left 3 times before leaving for the final time. And statistically, it's an average of 7 attempts to leave. So it happens. You leave, they lure you back in, right? Like hoover you back in, and you think like, okay, they're gonna change. Like I scared them straight, right, by leaving. So it's super common. But yeah, I left him for the first time within our marriage. Mm-hmm. So we stayed with my family for a couple of months.
Were you close
we were
to your
only in
family
Maine
at
for
this
about
point?
3 months, and then he got a job transfer to Boston. So then we moved to Massachusetts, which wasn't too bad, right? It was like a 2.5-hour drive to my parents from the Boston area where we were. And we were there, we got married in 2006, and we were in New England for about 2 years. And all of the times that I left were when we were in New England. And I mean, one time I just like, we got in, I don't want to give too much away because the full story is in the book. And like I waited for him to leave and I just drove to Maine. And when he got home, I wasn't there. And so, he ended up driving up to Maine that night in this whole dramatic thing. We had a huge talk and we figured things out and we were like, okay, we can do this. It's going to be better. Within like 2 weeks, I left again. But this parents and told them I was done, and we waited for him to leave for work. And then my parents were parked around the corner with a U-Haul, and we emptied the apartment. And so when he came home that time, there was no furniture. There was like nothing. And Actually, I think I have them in reverse. So the first time that I left, I was gone for a
Wow.
few days, and he was very rude and mean via text message. And so it was a few days that I stayed at my parents' house before he convinced me to come back down. And then it was the second time that I left that he actually drove up to Maine and just showed up at my parents' house. And we had a whole huge conversation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So while you were with your parents for
Mm-mm.
3 months,
No,
right?
no.
Did he display any of this behavior?
I mean, there was a
Uh,
few times that my
so he
my
concealed
mom's
it in
radar
front of
went
your
off.
parents.
Um, like at one point we were playing pool in the basement. My parents had a pool table in their basement, and we had some family over, and we were playing. And I had a couple of drinks, and I was just feeling silly, like not anything really. I was just kind of being like silly. I don't know how else to explain it. Um, for a girl who like never really drank before, having like two wine coolers, silly. Um, and he like pulled me aside and told me, "Sit down. You're being like stupid. Like you just sit down and relax." And my mom was like, "No, she does not. She's having fun. She can do what she wants. She can have fun if she wants to." Um, and that's really the only incident that I really remember that, they might have. Um, but yeah, my parents didn't really went back the second time. They were kind of like, well, she's made her choice. Um, and shortly after that, we ended up moving back to Florida. He got in trouble at work, and he ended up transferring back down to his. And, in my head, I was like, well, we were happy in Florida. Like, we didn't have any of the issues we're having up here. So maybe being back with our friends, family, things will go back to normal. So I agreed, like, yeah, I think we should go back. I think it'd be good for us to go back to Florida where we were happy. And yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back, everybody.
Life in Stitches by CK Sims. Available for purchase in paperback and ebook on all major platforms. Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Just before the break, we were talking to Sarah Doucette, who has written a book. And she was telling us about her situation with a abusive partner, husband, initially date person. Can't speak right now at this moment. Person that she was dating. And she's not giving too much away, which I can respect because she put a lot of effort and work into this book. But you had said that you just moved back to Florida.
Yes.
And the ideology around that was that you were happy in Florida.
Right.
None of the things that you were talking about that were happening up north.
So things were okay a little while.
What did happen?
He was seemingly pretty happy. He was back in Florida. But it wasn't until like later that I realized, like things never really were okay. It was long drawn out process. So we were married for so the first almost 2 years were in Maine, and then we moved back to Florida and around 2008. And from there, it just became like a systemic like who I was, and any confidence that I had slowly, one by one, relationships that I had with friends and family were slowly kind of disappearing. One of the things that, abusive partners do is they try to isolate you, right? So, he would find ways to get me angry at my friends so that I would stop hanging out with them, or like newer friends that they would just be like, I don't even want to like hang out with you. Like, this is just too much. So it got to the point that really my only friend was his aunt. And she was the only person that I really did anything with. Like, we would go out for drinks and I would go, hang out at her house and things like that. Those next like few years, like, can sound situation like this, but like I didn't really recognize any physical abuse during those years. And I say recognize because it wasn't that it wasn't happening,
Okay.
but I was like justifying it in my head that like, so most of what would happen is he was very particular about sleeping. And it got to the point where I was not allowed to go to bed until after he had gone to bed and was thoroughly asleep, because I toss and turn a little bit before falling asleep, and that would drive him nuts. And if I went to bed and I tossed and turned and it woke him up, he would like either kick me or like hit me. And if I accidentally touched him while I was sleeping, like a foot drifted over to his side of the bed and I touched him, it would be the same thing. And we're not talking like a soft kick, like to the point where I would wake up and I'd have like a bruise on my side, a bruise on my hip, because he had, and I just would tell myself, well, he just doesn't wake up well, he's not fully and so I always just kind of like talked it off and never really thought much of it. So for the most part, I always just said, I was like, well, he never really hit me until that last day. And it wasn't true. Much more into like psychological stuff. So one of the things that he loved to do, this was like, is, and he had issues with food. I don't know what his issues with food were, but so working full time, and I was, I did a second undergrad and master's. And at one time I was doing the last semester of my bachelor's and the first semester of my MBA concurrently at the same time. So I was MBA on the weekends, and 3 nights a week I was in finishing up my bachelor's degree. And he would come home after me and I'd be sitting there doing homework. I would have made dinner. Dinner's ready. He comes in the door and, hey, I made spaghetti for dinner. And something would have pissed him off. I don't know what it would have been. It could be anything, dirty dishes in the sink, right? Like whatever. And he would be like, I don't want that. And I'm like, okay, we can order takeout. Like I can run to the store and grab something different. Like, or I have other things I can make. And he was just like, no, I don't want anything from you. And I was just like, okay. So I'd go back to doing my homework. Eventually I'd go like put dinner. Obviously I wasn't going to eat it. Then he'd come out of the room and he'd go, I'm hungry. And I would, stop working on my paper and just say, okay, well, this spaghetti, I don't want anything from you. Okay. And this would go a couple of hours. Every few minutes he'd come out, I'm hungry. Okay. And I would like try to come up with more reasons every single time, or not reasons, but I'm thinking like, well, if I just find the right option, he's going to leave me alone. And it would inevitably end with me finally like following him into the bed in tears. Like, I don't know what you want. What do you want? I'll go to the restaurant and pick you up some takeout. Like, what is it you want? And then finally he'll be like, yeah, I want like this expensive meal from Carrabba's or whatever restaurant. And so I would order it. It'd be like 9:00 at night. I'd go pick it up, bring it back to him. He'd eat it in bed. Like, he just would go to bed when he got home a lot of times and play video games and just be nasty to me. And that was something that he did all the time. It was just little like mind games that he liked playing until like he found out. And it was, like, I never really knew what set him off. Or he would like to do kind of like the silent treatment, right? Where some upset him and then he could go days without talking to me. And sometimes he would go days without talking to me, and other times like find a reason to, you woke me up at night and like that. And if he hit me, then it ended sooner. If he didn't, it lasted longer, right? The silent treatment. And it was just like, those were his ways of like doling out punishment, for lack of a better term. At this time, he would have been,
How old would he have
so
been at
this
this
went
time?
on between the ages of like 24 and 26 for him, 27, somewhere in there. So when we got divorced, I was 25, I think, or 26 when I filed for divorce. And he was 2 years older than me. Yeah.
So young, right? But like,
Yeah.
because it's almost as if he's having toddler reaction, or like,
Mhm.
there's like, I feel like there might be a
Yeah.
development issue there somewhere.
I just think he's a straight up
Um,
sociopath.
I don't know. So
There's more like, one of the other things that he did throughout the marriage, that until the end, is he actually stole my identity. And when I left him, when I got the divorce, there was like $35,000 in bad debt that he had taken out over the years in my name. He got a hold of my social security number and he would like take out credit cards. When we first got married, okay, I'm talking like we had just moved to Maine. He got promoted to general manager one day with this like ginormous Dell gaming laptop. And I was like, where'd you get that? And he said that the store provides it to all new managers. Well, fast forward to I've left. I need to get a new car because everything was in his name, and he was my credit that was pretty much perfect when we got married was like in the low four. I had to go and I pulled my credit reports to find out what had happened. And he financed that laptop through Dell Financial Services online using my social, and then never paid a dime on it, but lied to me and told me that he got it from work. And then, you know, contact information, mailed bill, how found us. He would always get the mail and he would like chuck them in the dumpster. So I never saw any of this stuff. And, you know, so on top of all of that, like he was also like committing these financial crimes against me during our whole marriage. Yeah.
so maybe it's in the book, but
So
like,
at
I
the
have
time
to
that we
know.
got divorced,
Did you
so
go
the
after
night that I
him for
left
that?
was actually our 6-year wedding anniversary. We had decided to get divorced a couple of days prior, and so he came home intoxicated, and that was like the final straw, that he tormented me for hours, assaulted me, and finally when he passed out, I packed up what I could and got into my little Honda Civic and left and never went back. I just went homeless for a little while. I just lived in my car in the parking lot at work. And then shortly thereafter, he went on a shopping spree and overdrew all of our bank accounts. So I had no home, I had no money, nothing. So a girl from work was like, "Oh, I got divorced a few years ago. I had this great divorce attorney. Let me give you his info." She got me an appointment with him, and I went to go see him. And you know, I was like, "Listen, I'm afraid of my husband. Um, he stole all my money." I explained everything that's been going on. And he's like, "Yep, we can definitely take care of this. We can get him, you know, we'll get everything, blah, blah, blah. Um, but I'll need a $4,000 retainer." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't have that." Right. So, in Florida, you can just print the divorce papers off their website. So I ended up doing the divorce myself. I printed the papers, filled out everything. Now, I had spoken to a law enforcement friend about the debt stuff, and they were basically just like, I mean, you're going to have to prove that you didn't know about it, because it was his word against mine and it's marital debt technically, right? Like there's no proof that I didn't give him my social and say, yes, go ahead and finance this stuff. So what I ended up doing was requesting 50% of all the debt be paid by him in the divorce papers. When I got to court for the judge to approve the divorce, which, by the way, my ex-husband did not participate in whatsoever. So I had him serve divorce papers. He had 30 days to respond, either contest or agree, and he didn't respond at all. So I had to go online and print out a motion for default, fill that out, bring that back down to the court, file that motion, and then they finally granted me a court date. He was notified of the court date, but still chose not to go. So the judge was like, I'm just going to grant you everything you're asking for in these divorce papers. And then he looked me square in the eye and he said, however, unless out of the goodness of his heart, you're still going to have to sue him for it. And at that point, I was like, well, I don't have the money to sue him for it. So I let the debt go for a little while longer. And then after I finished grad school, got a decent job, and I just started negotiations with all of these collections agencies. And I was able to settle it for a lot less than what was owed at the time. Because, I mean, we're talking, we got divorced in 2012, 2013. I started paying off on this stuff. And the earliest debt was from 2006. Like, they just wanted something. So I ended up going it that way.
Yeah.
At one point, he reached out to me via email because I had like blocked all communication from him, except for the email. For whatever reason, I had forgotten about that. And he was asking me for tax documents. And he said he was trying to start a business and he needed to take out a business loan, but he needed our tax records from like 7 years or whatever. And I said, well, you owe me a lot of money. Why would I give you anything? He said, well, once I get this loan, I'll be able to pay you that money. And I was like, I just never responded back to him. I was like, that it's not going to happen. Like, there's no way. And if he really wanted those tax documents, he could contact the IRS, but I'm not giving him access to my social. Like, no. So yeah, that was the last communication we ever had. Because shortly after that, I received a phone call from his mother late at night, letting me know that his body had been found in the woods and homicide or suicide, and it was under investigation. Yeah. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So
I didn't see that.
The story continues where I was his training grounds in financial crimes, and he ended up doing almost exactly. So in the book, I describe what happened to me, and I got my hands on all of the police reports for his crimes and also for his death investigation. I got the CSI report, everything, and it was exactly what he did to a business partner. Except the business partner caught on. And the police officers did he didn't know that he was being recorded operation, as it were, where he confessed on the phone that he had, defrauded this guy. The charges were felony grand larceny and swindling of over $250,000. He had forged documents that somehow, like, a well-established financial institution allowed him into the safety deposit box, and he stole physical silver and gold from this guy, on top of getting into his retirement accounts, getting his name added as an authorized user to his credit cards, forging letterhead and signatures to get his credit limits increased from $10,000 to $30,000 on a credit card, which he then used to buy guns, ammunition. He took his girlfriend on a trip to Germany. He bought her an engagement ring. Yeah, so it was pretty sinister, the stuff. And he got arrested, and his parents got him out on bond or bail. I never know which term. And he died by suicide while he was out on bond. Yeah, self-inflicted.
So it was concluded it was died by suicide.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wanted him to get what was coming to him, in the sense that, he was looking at up to 30 years in prison Each sentence carried 15 years. So he probably would have served them concurrently, not consecutively, right? So maybe like 15 years if they like maxed out both sentences. And the thing is, he dug himself a hole. And he knew he had no way trying to convince this guy on a recorded line with officers, which is why he was on a vacation in Colorado, visiting his girlfriend at the time, that they arrested him. And they were like, no, we need to arrest him immediately, because he started talking about how like he was coming into an inheritance because his grandfather had died. And he needed to travel to Jerusalem with his grandfather's body. And when he got back after fulfilling that last wish of his grandfather, that he would get the inheritance and be able to pay him back for all the money that he stole. His grandfather is still alive. No.
Oh, wow. So there was really no end to his manipulation. Why do you think this is you may not know, and you may not have thought about this before, perhaps you have. Why do you think he latched to
him? Because I was raised in a very traditional household, right? The husband is the head of the household, so I was very submissive in that regard. I'm very nurturing. I'm very empathic. I was just very nurturing to him, and he needed a mother that he could also kind of control and kind of let his anger out on. So I mean, that's really the only thing I can think of, other than the fact that like it was just coincidence that like he and I met, we liked each other, we started dating, and he found what he needed. No, I don't think he was
Do
capable
you think
of
he ever
complex
loved you?
emotion. I think that and I think I'd use this analogy in the book, but like there were
Fair.
the many masks of Stephen, right? There was Stephen, then there was Steve-O, who was like this guy doing, jackass style like stunts with his buddies. There was the Stephen, who was his salesman persona. I mean, he was a phenomenal salesman. And then there was the Stephen of Doom. I don't know, like that's what he called himself sometimes. That was his email address and everything. And he had all of these different personas. And I think it almost makes me think of Dexter. Like it was a well-practiced face that he could put on for every situation that he was in. Mm-hmm.
I have so many questions, obviously, because I come from mental health background, and my brain always trails to like, what
Right.
was his upbringing like? All of these things, right? But the truth of the matter, it doesn't matter.
No, I get it. I mean, his parents were
Because,
batshit crazy
and
too.
that
Like,
was
I
more
remember
of a
at one point
curiosity
going to
piece
his
for
mom
me.
and dad. I was in the car
But
with them, and I was like, I'm going to talk to them. And in my head, right, like my juvenile mind, I just asked them, I was like, why is Steven so mean to me? Like, why does he hate me so much? And his mom turned around in the car and looked at me, and she just said, it's the woman's lot in life to suffer. I was like, okay, we're not talking about this again.
oh,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So okay, enough about Stephen. Very surprised, and this. So you have my brain all like messed up now.
Yeah.
So I love the
Thank you.
title of your book, right? So Stronger Than That. Love that. A domestic violence survivor uncovers the truth of her abuser. Which, I mean, now after spending
It was.
45 minutes with you, that's a lot of truth to uncover. And but what I want to know now,
Good.
and for everybody
Yeah.
that's listening
No,
at home,
I'm,
how is Sarah?
I trauma. But I have a lovely mental health professional that I see every other week. Honestly, writing the book was so incredibly therapeutic. One of the things for me with my post-traumatic stress is kind of I didn't realize how much I had disassociated with what had happened. And so I was, that would spark anxiety. And I was just like, I don't know why I'm anxious right now, but like I just feel like this impending sense of doom. And as I was writing the book and retelling the stories, I was remembering things that I was like, how did I forget that? How could I ever forget that happened? And as I reintegrated stuff, and then I would talk through it with my writing coach, and then I would talk through it with my therapist that next week, I was able to like reintegrate parts of myself and then deal with it, right? Like, so now dirty dishes in the sink don't send me into a tailspin. You know, if
Yeah.
my husband's doing laundry for me, that doesn't upset me anymore, right? Because, you know, if my ex-husband had to do laundry or pick up dishes, I was in for a world of torture for the next few days, right? Of whatever kind he picked. So it was really, really great experience for me writing the
Yeah.
book. I actually just published a trauma healing journal on Amazon. And it just because this is what worked for me. And it's basically just like grounding yourself in the present. Like, what are 3 feeling right now emotionally? What are 3 physical feelings you're having right now? Now what's the memory? Like, what's coming up for you? Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been great for
CBT.
me. So
Like really,
um, yeah.
it's a
And then, you know, I
lifesaver.
met my current husband. We've been married 4 years, this August. We have an amazing 2-year-old. Um, and so, you know, so life is good. Things are going really well. And yeah, I'm back in Maine. Yep. Yeah.
And you're in the up north in the States again?
Yeah.
Okay,
No, I met him
perfect. Did you
here
meet
on Bumble.
the new man in Maine or Florida or
Yeah. Sometimes they work, right?
what, you know?
Yeah, no,
I
so
hear Bumble gets you good
we met through
results.
online
So
dating, and
there
yeah,
you go.
you know, he's fantastic. He was with me through a lot of the journey. We were together 2 years before we got married. Um, so we've been together almost 6 years total. So he was sitting in the hallway stressing out while I was talking to the business partner that my ex-husband defrauded, you know, because he knew I was like got to pee my pants to talk to this guy. So in the book, I interviewed the man that he defrauded. I interviewed his
Mm.
really good friend at the time, my ex-husband's really good friend. I interviewed the woman he had an affair with during our marriage. So that's a spicy one. Um, and then I interviewed the woman he was dating at the time of his arrest and death. So
Sounds like it's going to
yeah,
be quite a ride of a book. Which for me, I like so it stronger than that.
it
I
is.
love that opening, but
Memoir.
it almost feels like
Hmm.
true crime-ish mixed with like romance and TV and all of that sort of thing. So like not that we should sensationalize your story, but I think to me, if you want a good book to read, see someone explain turmoil in their life, this sounds like a really good book to be able to do that. And the fact that you were able to kind of work the courage up to talk to the business partner, talk to the friend, the girl that he had an affair with, the girl he was
It
dating,
was.
like these sort of things. That
It was very
must have
nerve-wracking.
been
Or
very
he was
nerve
a little bit
wracking
scary for me.
in those moments.
And you know, he's a nice guy, don't get me wrong, but very angry, and for good reason. Um, no, he didn't. And
Of
to this
course.
day,
Because
is
then
on
he
like a
probably got
smear
nothing
campaign
back.
against him. They still believe that their son never did any of this stuff, even though it's on phone recording him confessing. They still claim his innocence, and he tried to sue to get the contents of the estate. So there was like $10,000 in guns. Um, he had put $15,000 of upgrades, like snorkel attachments and things like that, on his. So this guy was like, "Well, I want that stuff." Like he bought all of that with my money. And you know, and Steven's family would never give it to him. No, if he finally sued them and if he won the case or not. He also had a suit against the bank that let, you know, him in to the safety deposit box. But I think the thing for me though about the book is, I've got most people who pick it up, they just read it in one. But I have been contacted by so many women alone anymore. And that's what it's about, right? Like, you're not alone. Other people have gone through this. Like, there's no shame. It doesn't matter, like, where you came from, how much money you have, the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, right? Like, it just does not matter. This can happen and it doesn't make you stupid. Because that's another thing I hear a lot when people talk about domestic violence. They're like, I'm a smart person. And I'm like, you don't have to preface that. Like, of course you are. But this person, no. Yeah, exactly.
It's nothing to do with smarts. It has everything to do with emotional attachment, right? And that other individual knowing exactly what buttons to push, what to say, what to do, how to
Exactly.
act,
So,
to
and now I do a
manipulate
lot of
that
talking
love that
and
you
working
have
with
for them.
women who
So
have
it's
experienced financial and economic abuse. In my situation, I experienced a lot of specifically coercive debt. And a lot of women who were in these relationships and men, when they get out, their partner may have been in complete control of their finances. So they don't know how to make a budget. They don't know how to balance their checking account. They don't know how to pay rent. They don't know how to write a check. Like, they don't know how to set up, they don't even know how to read a paycheck, right? Because they may not have been allowed to work. So I'm on the board of an organization here called Together Invested, and we do a lot of divorce workshops, and we do a quarterly Waking Up to Wealth, which $35 for a day, where we just like talk about investing, and we talk about money, and we talk about anything they want to, like salary negotiations, just becoming more comfortable with your finances. And unpacking generational trauma around money too, right? There's a lot of that goes along with some of this stuff. So, yeah, so that's kind of what I'm up to now.
I love it. Everyone, the book is called Stronger Than That. A domestic violence survivor uncovers the truth of her abuser. I will
Yeah.
link this book and the workbook that you just published in the show description. You can follow Sarah at
Yep.
on Instagram at main Sarah85. You'll find her. Give her a
Yeah.
follow. Give her
I
a
will
book a
be.
purchase. Make sure you
Oh, sorry.
leave
I was just gonna say.
reviews.
So I
Tell your
am also
friends.
dropping a podcast in
Sarah, I'm
October.
so happy that.
That is called
Go
Stronger Than
ahead.
That. So I'm gonna tell my own story, and I
Nice.
already have lined up a couple of
I like
phenomenal
it.
people who have also been stronger than that. Everyone's that is different. Yeah. So, depression, anxiety, a
It
medical
is,
issue
right?
with children, like whatever the that is, that is the people that we're going to be talking to. So keep an eye out for that in October.
I love this for you. So Stronger Than That, out in October.
Thank you for
The
having
2
me.
books. Follow her on Instagram. Thank you so much for coming on
Yes,
Poddin My
thank you. It was
Noggin.
so lovely to
I'm
meet you.
very
Thanks so much
happy
for having me.
to hear that you are doing well. It was lovely to meet you as well. For everyone else, thanks for tuning in. Go out and live your wildest dreams, and I'll see you next time.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.